Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to jimmydore.com. So, breaking, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, declares that Israel is engaging in racial segregation and apartheid in occupied Palestine. This just in, the ICJ is officially anti-Semitic, in case you were wondering. Here it is.
A number of participants have argued that Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory amount to segregation or apartheid in breach of Article 3 of CERD. Article 3 of CERD provides as follows, I quote, "States parties particularly condemn racial segregation and apartheid and undertake to prevent, prohibit, and eradicate all practices of this nature in territories under their jurisdiction." This provision refers to two particularly severe forms of racial discrimination, racial segregation, and apartheid. The court observed that Israel's legislation and measures impose and serve to maintain a near complete separation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem between the settler and Palestinian communities. For this reason, the court considers that Israel's legislation and measures constitute a breach of Article 3 of CERD. Having found that Israel's settlement policy, its acts of annexation, and its related discriminatory legislation and measures are in breach of international law.
So there you go. The International Court of Justice declares Israel is engaging in racial segregation and apartheid in occupied Palestine. In response, Israel claims that having a functioning conscience is anti-Semitic. Just so you know. The UN court says Israel's presence in occupied Palestine territories is illegal and should end. That part slips by completely, is that they're admitting it's an occupied territory. It's an occupied territory. Basically, every major authority around the world is forced to admit what we knew years and years and years and years ago. If they were any later to this, they would need a pregnancy test. Okay. But guess what? The top UN court said Friday it's unlawful. It's called it an end to the settlement construction to stop immediately issuing an unprecedented sweeping condemnation of Israel's rule over the lands it captured 57 years ago. But it's a non-binding. It's in a non-binding opinion. The International Court Justice pointed to a wide list of policies, including the building and expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, use of the area's natural resources, the annexation and imposition of permanent control over the land, and discriminatory policies against Palestinians, all of which it said violated international law. And a non-binding opinion is like a dildo made out of Nerf, okay? So, I mean, it's lucky it's non-binding, or else Israel would face some kind of consequences for its crimes against humanity. So it's a good thing it's not binding. The 15-judge panel said Israel's abuse of its status as the occupying power renders its presence in the occupied Palestinian territory unlawful. It says its continued presence was illegal and should be ended as rapidly as possible. It said Israel must end settlement construction immediately and that existing settlements must be removed. Yeah, that's not happening. No, they're gonna keep occupying. They're gonna keep building settlements, and they're gonna keep dropping bombs on defenseless civilians. That's what's going to happen. I'm not a Kreskin, but I'm pretty sure I'm a good predictor of this one. Israel, which normally considers the United Nations and international tribunals as unfair and biased, did not send a legal team to the hearings, but it submitted written comments saying that the questions put to the court are prejudiced, of course, and failed to address Israeli security concerns. Israeli officials have said the court's intervention could undermine the peace process, which has stagnant for more than a decade. Wow. So the court's going to undermine the peace process. That's what I call chutzpah. In response to the ruling, Prime Minister Bibi said the West Bank and East Jerusalem were part of the Jewish homeland's historical homeland. They were part of the Jewish people's historical homeland. So he's just saying we're taking over that. We're just taking it. It's ours. So if it's their historical homeland, just so you know, Benjamin Netanyahu's real last name is Milikowski.
Ha!
He changed it because he doesn't want you to know he's not from there. He's from Philly. The Jewish people are not conquerors in their own land, not in our. So that's the argument. Not in our, and so the Palestinians have to go. It's pretty clear that that's what they wanted all along, and they're trying to get those Palestinians either to Egypt or Jordan or someplace else because they want Gaza and they want the West Bank. The Jewish people are not conquerors in their own land, not in our eternal capital, Jerusalem, and not in the land of our ancestors in Judea and Samaria. This is again just given to them by the Balfour Declaration. No false decision in The Hague will distort this historical truth, and likewise, the legality of Israeli settlements in all the territories of our homeland cannot be contested. Okay. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, he's talking about when all the continents were still touching. And Poland was much closer to Jerusalem in the Paleolithic age. The court's opinion, sought by the UN General Assembly after Palestine request, is unlikely to affect Israel. Yeah, of course. But its resounding breath, including saying Israel could not claim sovereignty in the territories and was impeding Palestinians' right to self-determination, could impact international opinion. Really? Really? This is what happens when you're told that you're royalty. The people in Israel have been told that they're born to be royalty. Look what happens when the schools teach them that everyone is inferior to them. Look what that makes. So, in a separate case, the International Court of Justice is considering a South African claim that Israel's campaign in Gaza amounts to genocide. A claim that Israel vehemently denies. Israel's captured the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip in the 1967 Mideast War. The Palestinians seek all three areas for an independent state. Not getting it. Israel considers that the West Bank to be a disputed territory whose future should be decided in negotiations. Yeah. While it has moved population there and settlements to solidify its hold, it has annexed East Jerusalem in a move that is not internationally recognized, while it withdrew from Gaza in 2005, but maintained a blockade of the territory after Hamas took power in 2007. So they're not they're controlling it. So that's why they call it an open air prison, because you can't go in or out. Nothing gets in or out without the Israeli say. You don't have freedom of movement. You're in a prison. The international community generally considers all three areas to be occupied territory. Erwin van Veen, a senior research fellow at some think tank in The Hague, said that if half the court rules that Israel's policies in the West Bank and East Jerusalem breach international law, it should isolate Israel further internationally, at least from a legal point of view. He said such a ruling would worsen the case for occupation. It removes any kind of legal, political, philosophical underpinning of the Israeli expansion project. It would also strengthen the hand of those who seek to advocate against it, such as the grassroots Palestinian-led movement advocating boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. He said it could also increase the number of countries that recognize the state of Palestine, in particular in the Western world, following the recent example of Spain, Norway, and Ireland, the land of ire. Israel has built well over 100 settlements, according to the anti-settlement monitoring group Peace Now. The West Bank settler population has grown by more than 15% in just the past 5 years to more than 500,000 Israelis, according to a pro-settler group. Really? Netanyahu's hardline government is dominated by settlers and their political supporters. Netanyahu has given his finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, a former settler leader, unprecedented authority over settlement policy. Smotrich has used this position to cement Israel's control over the West Bank by pushing forward plans to build more settlement homes and to legalize outposts. Bezalel. Isn't that the demon that Rick Moranis summons in Ghostbusters? Authorities recently approved the appropriation of nearly 5 square miles of land in Jordan Valley, a strategic piece of land deep inside the West Bank, according to a copy of the order obtained by the Associated Press. Data from Peace Now, the tracking group, indicates it was the largest single appropriation approved since the 1993 Oslo Accords at the start of the peace process. The ICJ says that all Israeli settlements and walls have to be dismantled, and all those Palestinians displaced must be able to go back to their homes. That's what the ICJ says. But the United States is not going to go along with that. Here's Jeremy Corbyn. He says for years, the BDS campaigners have been demonized for opposing the occupation of Palestine. Today, they have been vindicated by an ICJ judgment, which called on states to stop aiding Israelis' unlawful presence in Palestinian territories and the occupation-free Palestine. Okay. So, I still have friends who still are torn over this. Jewish friends. History's not going to be kind to what Israel's doing or what they've been doing for their 70-some year occupation since they did the Nakba. All you have to do is look up the Nakba. Look up what was the Nakba? How did Israel get founded? By displacing 750,000 Palestinians from their home and slaughtering a lot of them. BDS stands for, what does the B stand for? Boycott, divestment, sanctions, right? Is that what that stands for? Mm-hmm. So, okay, there you go. And Joe Biden's funding it, along with Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party and a lot of the Republican Party. Certainly the Speaker, Mike Johnson. Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to jimmydore.com.